Okay, Trez. Just give me a moment here. Make sure that we're live.
It says in the upper left that we are.
Yes, we are. Okay. We're now live on Facebook. So, good evening, everybody. Today is August 22nd, 2024. I'm pleased, privileged to be joined tonight by one of my very best friends, Mike Trezza, who will be discussing with me the first 3 nights of the Democratic National Convention, maybe just a general political landscape. We say the first 3 days because, of course, the DNC is still going on right now, and as we speak, I think they're gearing up. I have it on, and they have some of the, not the main speakers. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but not the main speakers speaking yet. So hopefully, we got everybody before they tune in. And if you see us tonight and you want to join in, please write your comments. I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to see those comments in real time. And before we start, Trez, let me just also apologize to Legislator Scott Davis. I had him on a few weeks ago, the last time I did one of these, and the Zoom was just driving me crazy. So we were talking about something very important having to do with water in the village of Hempstead, and we made some good points, but we had some technical issues. So I apologize to you, legislator, for that. And at the end there, I probably lost a little bit of my patience because I was just really upset with
I
Zoom. So
remember that. I
yeah,
remember
yeah,
that.
yeah,
You
it was
got a
my
little
fault.
frustrated. That was the last time you did one of these shows, right?
It gave me a little bit of I was spooked for a little while. It took me a little while to get back in the saddle, I think, but Trez, listen, thank you for joining me. And in the spirit of friendship and in the spirit of trying to get things off to a good start, I figure I would just read this and admit that I occasionally can be wrong. So it looks like the Yankees won today, and according to the New York Post, not your favorite paper probably, but Garrett Cole was excellent and led a staff that held Cleveland to 1 hit. I mean, this is interesting. Giancarlo, I can never pronounce his name. Stanton hit a 3-run home run.
He did.
So that's interesting.
He
Yeah,
did.
that
I
doesn't
got a
happen too
chance to see a
often.
lot of that game. Actually, what
Yeah.
happened, which made it interesting, was that the first hitter for Cleveland, Quan, got a base hit, and then Cleveland didn't get another hit all day long, which is supposedly the first time in 120 years of Yankee baseball that has ever happened. So you see something brand new that you've never seen at any
Well,
time you turn on the game.
well,
But
we
I thought what before we get into the political landscape,
uh,
I thought what you were going to admit that you were wrong about was the
yes.
fact that Aaron Judge is by far
Well,
right the
yeah,
best player.
we are friends, and perhaps you knew where I was going. The next thing I was going to read to you was that somewhere in this article, here we go. Judge cracked open the scoring with his 48th home run of the year. And I didn't see the game yesterday, but I didn't see the game today, but I think he hit two yesterday. So you texted me that, right? So I have to admit to you from the outset that I think you might have been right about this from the outset, and maybe in fact, Aaron Judge is the best player in the majors. And I was telling you, debating you that it was Otani. I still think there's a case to be made, but I think at this point you're probably right. So I want to start off by acknowledging your rightness and my wrongness. All right,
I
so
don't.
we
I
got.
appreciate that. I don't want to be the "I told you so" guy, but
Oh, listen.
we'll let that one go for now. All
All
right.
right, all right. Well, listen, Trez. Aside from the Yankees doing very well, clearly this convention looks like it's got a lot of energy. So,
It does.
what are your thoughts on the convention?
My thought on both conventions, Ray, before I separate the two out, my thought generally is that these things, and I think you know exactly where I'm going to go first. These things are too long. They're too many nights, and they're too many hours per night. We need both of these things have become so bloated and so excessive. We need to trim the fat. This
Yeah.
needs to be 3 nights, no more than 3 hours per night. And if that means we don't get to you, Amy Klobuchar, I mean, I'm sorry, we don't get to you. I mean, I don't want
Right.
to single out Amy because she was brief, which is nice. A lot of people were on there more time than they should have been. A lot of people shouldn't have even been on there. And I'm going to give you one that I think is going to surprise you. And that might be our first disagreement of the night.
Hmm.
Because I know that you had on your Facebook complimented and said something along the lines, I don't know exactly what you said. Something along the lines of he still has it.
Mm,
Was Bill Clinton.
mm,
Right. I don't know why Bill Clinton was up there. I have to be really honest with you. I thought that he looked feeble. I thought that he looked old. I thought he sounded old. I thought the whole thing with him looked and seemed awkward. It almost seemed like he looked and felt out of place. And if you notice, he gave I don't know if you stayed with it. I usually wouldn't because I like to come in with my own ideas and hear yours. But he gave Scott Jennings, who regularly appears as the lone Republican on a CNN discussion panel, he gave Scott Jennings an opening that I didn't disagree with. Did you hear that
no,
exchange?
please elaborate. I didn't see that. No.
Okay, so I stayed with it a few minutes after Bill Clinton spoke, and they went to the table discussion. And Scott Jennings said he quoted Bill Clinton on this, and honestly, he was absolutely right. He said Bill Clinton just said we all feel like a huge weight was lifted off our shoulders. Did you
Mhm.
hear Bill say that?
Yes, I did hear him say that actually.
And he
I did hear.
elaborated on it, and he said, you know what the big weight that was lifted off our shoulders was?
Joe Biden not running?
Exactly. Joe
Yeah.
Biden was the huge weight that was on our shoulders that got lifted off. And Bill Clinton, whether he meant to say that or he meant to say it in that way, he did say that. And I thought it was an awkward way of of putting it. I certainly don't think that's what he meant, but he
Right.
gave Republicans generally, and specifically, again, Scott Jennings, who I like and I think is a smart guy, and
Yeah.
I admire his ability to sit on CNN night after night and be sometimes one of two, but most times the only Republican battling against two or three or four Democrats on issues.
I have to say, Trez, I mean, not that you need me to say I commend you for this, but I really do because, first of all, I agree with you about Scott Jennings. But, getting back to the point you made about Bill Clinton, I uh, thought that I was going to feel the way that you do right now about him. In other words, when I was talking to a common friend of ours yesterday morning, before the speech, I had said the same thing. I said, why are they rolling him out? Not just because he's been around, hasn't been around for a while, but also because he's kind of like the poster child for somebody who got away with the whole Me Too thing, and that's always going to be something that is hard to explain. We look back on time on a lot of people. Trump is one, but a lot of other people for things that they may have done or alleged to have done, whatever the case may be. And Clinton, obviously, we know. However, when he started to speak, I realized very quickly that there's a lot of depth behind his speech. Now, to me, that's a signal of his intellect. And then I also appreciate the fact, just as somebody who likes, watching public speaking and public speakers, that it seemed to me that he has a natural ability that I have forgotten about. And I compare it to people who speak now, younger people, and I'm like, I don't know. I saw something in his speech, and I came to learn today, also from our common friend, that the teleprompters apparently stopped working. So I was commenting to him. I said, I
Yeah,
don't
well,
know,
you
because
could see Bill looking down at his notes
yeah,
while he was speaking, which again, I don't take him to task for
yeah,
that. Any person who's doing public speaking should always have that as a backup, just in case, because electronics certainly aren't foolproof. To your early point that you made, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, if he had to look at notes, I mean, you see news reporters all the time with notes at their desk
right,
because they say, hey, what if the guy working the teleprompter screws up or the teleprompter craps out? But Ray, let me make these 2 points. Number one, if the whole vibe of the DNC, besides energy and enthusiasm, um, which is all great, if the
right,
whole vibe is supposed to be forward looking, we're
uh-huh,
not looking back, then number one, why are we, as you say, why are we wheeling in a guy that was president anywhere between 24 and 32 years ago? And
right,
secondly, if this is about, I mean, I want to be careful here. If this is about equal opportunity for all and we can overcome whatever disadvantage related to gender or related to race or socioeconomic group, then why are we bringing in a guy? And right, I don't want to re-legislate the whole Lewinsky thing, but why are we bringing in a guy who, at the very most benign, you could say, took advantage of a young girl that was 19, 20 years old at the time? Why are we doing that? It didn't make sense to me. And it just, I said, wait a minute, we have enough people to deliver powerful messages. Oprah, I thought, was great. Michelle Obama clearly was great. Barack Obama was great. And obviously,
Well,
we can
Trent, so
trace the
what about hold on,
lineage.
I got to interrupt you. What about we're missing one, and I thought we were going to start with him. It's fine we didn't, but I thought I understand your point about Clinton, but what do you think about Hakeem Jeffries' speech?
I honestly, I got to be really honest with you. I did not see Hakeem.
Okay, fair.
I know a lot of people reacted to it. I think he's a great speaker. I'm sure he gave a great speech. I didn't even honestly see highlights of it. I was really glad. I went to the Met game on Monday night. Please don't ever share that picture of me in the Met shirt outside the stadium. By the way, I'll send
Right.
you a check if you plan to blackmail me. Um,
Right.
but I did get home Monday night in time to hear Joe Biden, and I'm glad I did, because he was one of several people I really, really wanted to hear.
Yeah.
I was surprised
Yeah.
that they put him on so late. And again, no jokes here about, hey, he's got to be in bed by 9 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And number two, I was surprised he went so long. I mean, I was timing out his speech because I was trying to go to bed. It was 11:30 Eastern, obviously 10:30 Central when he started. It was right. It was 12:15, 12:20 on the Eastern seaboard by the time he finished up, which again, that surprised me.
Yeah, well, you made your confession about having missed Hakeem Jeffries' speech, and I'll say, honestly, again, I'm generally not a pessimist, but some people call me a Debbie Downer or whatever. I didn't think the Clinton speech was going to be anything. I thought, technically, aside from what he said or didn't say, the way he has a command of an audience and the way that he does certain techniques, I don't know how to describe it. I think you're dealing with a master of public speaking there,
I
in terms of
disagree.
some,
I think he
yeah,
was that at one time. I think he's
uh,
definitely, clearly to me,
yeah,
um, lost a little
age,
bit off the
yeah,
fastball. Which again, I don't want to seem like the guy who's beating up on old guys, because I'm a much
right,
older guy than you. So I don't want somebody
uh,
pushing me out of the way or say, hey, you can no longer come here, or what you
right.
have to say is not going to be impactful to this audience in any way. I don't want to do that. But again, I actually felt sorry for Bill watching that speech. Yeah, it seemed like he had gotten very old. His voice sounded very old. He looked much older, and I just didn't feel like anything he said had that great an impact, or couldn't have been said better by Obama, Michelle Obama, Oprah. Now, again, I'm not going to pretend
Uh,
to have seen every speaker. I can't sit through 45 hours of this, right? It's too much.
Well,
But
yeah, for sure, Mike, for sure, this issue about it going late, I agree with you. And I was going to say that I acknowledge on Monday that the very first night of the convention, it's just confession time, so I had broken my elbow like almost 2 years ago. And I'll blame it on the elbow, but I occasionally will take a gummy to help me sleep. And I took one, and so I had passed out. I was up shortly thereafter, but I kind of missed the entire Joe Biden speech.
oh, wow, Ray,
I
you
know, I know. We're doing a show about isn't that terrible? We're doing a show.
no,
And
it's not.
yeah, but you know what the funny thing is that I like the Clinton speech. I actually watched it with my mother a second time. So, but Hakeem Jeffries spoke very powerfully, and he started off, he has a specific cadence. Sometimes I get into it, sometimes I don't, but I wasn't really feeling it the first minute that he spoke, and I was like, here we go. And I actually commented it to somebody, and I said, look, I texted a friend of ours, and I said, I don't know, and I just said it's a distinct cadence, which was my way of saying I really don't like it. But then he started building, and it went from being like whatever to being good to being better, better, better. And then at the end of it, it was like, wow, that was pretty interesting. I didn't see that one coming, and I give him all the credit. I don't know that Hakeem Jeffries would have given that kind of a speech a couple years ago. I truly believe he's growing into the role he has as speaker. I think there's a little confidence there, and I think that more than anything else, I'm not a big fan of this whole joy thing. I don't know what it means really, but I do think that his demeanor was excellent yesterday. I thought it was a good speech. What do you think? I got to ask you this one, Trez. Did you stay up? You didn't stay up for. Did you watch? You didn't watch Walls. Did you get to Walls? No.
Oh yeah, of
You
course,
did
of
get to
course
Walls.
I
Okay,
did.
because he
Yeah,
was late, so I don't know.
yeah. Well,
Okay.
listen, I mean, there are certain people like, again, I wanted to see Joe Monday night. To me, that
Hmm.
was a big payoff. I had to see Joe. I had to see what his approach was going to be toward handing off the baton.
But
I definitely wanted to see Tim Walz, and I had a few takeaways from his speech. Every time
uh
I hear him speak, Ray. Now, again, I'm going to be very frank with you. I
tell me.
thought
I'm dying to
I,
know.
I thought that Trump made a mistake in
Uh-huh.
selecting Vance.
Yeah.
I told you that at the time. I've told you that a couple times since. I actually wondered whether Kamala made a mistake selecting Walz, only because everybody's been talking for months now about we have to court those undecided or independent voters in the middle in those key swing states. And Trump chose a guy to the right of him, which does nothing to help him with those voters. And I thought that Harris chose a guy who was to the left of her. And I said, well, how does that make sense if you're trying to reel in those independents? So um, since then, I've heard Walls speak several times. And I thought he was really, really good last night. And every time I hear him speak, I like him more and more. And here's one of the things, Ray, um, as a takeaway. Number one, obviously, he was a high school teacher and he was a coach before he got into politics. But the thing that says that maybe this is the right guy for the job, while he was coaching football and teaching social studies, and they mentioned this, they didn't make a big deal out of it, but I think it is a big deal. He was also the advisor to the Gay Straight Alliance Club, which meant he had to go in that locker room and tell those kids that play football, hey, guess what, guys? I'm also the advisor of the Gay Straight Alliance Club. Alliance is the key word here. And I want you guys, when you see somebody in the hall you think is gay, or somebody who's willing to say, I'm gay, to still treat that person with respect, not bully them, not ridicule them, not threaten them. And I said to myself, well, here's a guy, you can be a football coach and win a state championship, but you can also be the advisor of the Gay Straight Alliance. To me, Ray, that's impressive.
And Trez, I want to pick up on that point in just a moment, but before we go on, you remind me talking about Governor Walz and everything that I wanted to actually say something from the very beginning because I'm not the first person to say this. We've seen it on Facebook all day today, but there's many people, some people, not many. There's some people who have, I guess, ridiculed or made fun of the governor's son, and
Oh,
I don't know
oh,
exactly. Right. And so I just want to say, and some of the people who are doing it, like Ann Coulter, I mean, you really, it's just so sad in a way. It's not, it doesn't make me sad. It makes me angry. And all I have to say is that for somebody like Ann Coulter, I mean, listen, if I'm on an island and there's a jellyfish in Ann Coulter, I'm touching the jellyfish first. You know what I mean? She's the very last, but there's another way of saying it. I said it the nicer way, There's another, the point is that she's just completely repulsive on every level. And for her to make that comment, and for anybody in the world, whatever your politics may be, and I clearly am somebody right in the middle. We know, we talk about this all the time. I'm telling you, that was horrible. And anybody who supports that, even as a joke, I mean, listen, I don't mind making jokes about people when they're short and fat, mostly because I'm short and fat, so it's fine. But the point is that when you make fun of somebody for those reasons, it's just outrageous. And many people have commented on this on Facebook, and I agree 100% with them. Some people have been very nasty about it, and they should be nasty about it because that was a disgusting comment and anything like that. So just want to reiterate that. But I agree with
I'm
you.
glad I'm glad I didn't see that because
Yeah,
honestly, that would have made me angry. How
yeah.
old? Because I don't know anything about his family. How old is the young man? His son? Is he a high school kid?
I think I had read somewhere, I could be wrong about this, 16 or something like that,
Okay,
but he
all
was
right.
clearly very proud of his father. There's
So they're
certain
making fun
things.
of the fact that he was crying,
Yeah,
or that he
I
was
think at some point he was so proud he was saying that's my dad, in a
right.
way that was very heartwarming.
Yeah,
That's the only way to interpret that. You could be, whatever your candidate is. If it's Trump, you could be all Trump. You could be all anybody else, Bobby, anybody else you want to be. But there's certain things. As you know, I have a pretty, nasty sense of humor. I think, sometimes gets me in trouble. But I think there's nothing like that. There's not humor in that. I mean, that's just fucking stupid, And I hate to say it that way, but honestly, anybody who does that is just a fucking asshole, and that's really the
yeah.
only way you could put
Listen,
it. I mean,
I
that's just
wouldn't
really bad,
I wouldn't spend that any time on
Yeah.
that or give that any
Yeah,
oxygen. I
but
think
I agree with you. Tim Walz spoke very well, and so getting back to your earlier point, though, do you feel as though it's been because you were talking about the time and so forth? Do you feel like it's been too much fluff and too much music
too
and too much
much,
of that?
too much. And
Too much
listen,
entertainment. Okay.
I don't dislike John Legend. I don't need to hear John Legend at 11:30 at night. Let's get the candidates. Let's get this key speaker. So to me, highlight number one of the first night should have been Joe Biden, but that should have been Ray at about 10:30 Eastern time. So we can
Right.
hear from Joe and then we can go to bed at a reasonable hour. Okay. Highlight of night number two should have been Tim Walz, and highlight of night number three, if we go with my plan, a 3 night convention limited to 3 hours a night, should be Kamala. And it should be Ray, to jump ahead of where I know you're going to go with me. It should be her sharing a little bit of vision. Should she get
Yeah.
into specifics, policy related? No, this is not the place for that. But she does need to, tonight, she does need to come off as a very, very serious person. And, the energy and the enthusiasm and the joy, as you mentioned, right? The Democrats keep referring to this joy that they're sharing. It only takes you so far. There is going to come a time, not tonight, but in the very near future, and I'm hoping it's within the next, I don't know, 10 days, 2 weeks. She has to sit down for a long form interview. I wish it were with me, or I wish it were with you, because I know either one of us would ask questions that would be specific, that would make her make pronouncements about where she stands on specific issues, and flesh it out in a little bit of detail. She shouldn't do that tonight, but she should start to share a vision about what a Harris presidency looks like. What does it look like? What are we looking to accomplish in the first 30 days, 90 days,
Yeah. Yeah.
180 days?
Well, listen, you started off and I thought to myself, well, here we go, and then actually, by the time you got to the end there, I think we've never been more in sync, Trez, because I agree with you 100% on that analysis that as enthusiastic as a lot of people have been about this convention, and I have given plenty of credit, I thought Michelle Obama was an excellent speaker. I thought Barack Obama was an excellent speaker. I thought that Governor Walz was an excellent speaker. Obviously, I thought Bill Clinton and Hakeem Jeffries all spoke very, very well. Okay, so I've given plenty of credit. I think they've done a good job. I happen to like the music, but I also think during the roll call that was kind of entertaining. Um, but I also think that it's gone a little long in some regards. But I agree with you. I think that there has to be substance. And maybe tonight, maybe to your point, you're right. It's not going to be tonight. Okay, maybe she wants to continue this theme of unity and everything else, but I agree with you 100%. And I'll add to that point that, many people are not happy with the Biden administration. There's not just the age issue, there's also this issue of would he have won against Trump for other reasons. Age was the overt reason, but there are other reasons why people may not. I'm going to read Boris's comment in just a second, Trez, but I think that there has to be some substance to this as well, and somebody was commenting. Actually, I think it was Bill O'Reilly was commenting on the radio today, and I agree with him 100% on this. The debate, he predicted what's going to happen is this, that she's going to do well tonight. She's going to come out of this convention with a bounce, and that she's going to peak sometime next week in terms of the polls, right? So she'll be up somewhere between 4, 6, 7, maybe 7%. I mean, that's a lot in this
It
election,
is. That's a
right?
big
So
jump.
so he says, look, it's going to happen next week. You'll see it next week. It's going to be a slow week because everyone's going to deserve a vacation, right? And it's the last week of August, and probably only you and I are going to be around. But the media deserves a vacation, I guess. So they're going to be away, and it's going to be quiet. And then you got back Labor Day. It's only a week after Labor Day that this debate happens, and everything that week is going to be about debate prep. So what his point is that there's never been an election where a debate has been more pivotal, and I agree with him. I mean, the bounce and all the feel good is going to carry her to some extent. She's done a good job unifying the party. She's raised a lot of money. Where the money came from, where does the money ever come from? We never really, I mean, we know, but we don't know from either side. It's always the same shit. But the bottom line of it is that she's done a good job of what she had to do a good job for. I thought the theatrics were good in this conference, but you're right. She's going to have to sit down and talk about the issues. And and my point is, she's going to have to figure out how to kind of gently talk about what she didn't like about her current job or the job that her current administration did. Because I don't think anyone wants to hear her say that I'm going to just continue everything the way that Joe did. Because even if you're the most fervent Democrat, there are certain things that you could talk about that weren't going in the right direction. I'm very critical of the president in many regards, particularly his foreign policy. I need to hear from her about that. I need to hear about this border, which drives me freaking crazy. I mean,
Yep. Yep.
I need to hear that at some point. I don't, my assignment, I'm sorry for all my friends who are very, Democratic. I'm Democrat. I'm like George Santos. I'm Democrat-ish. But I mean, that's one of the all-time great lines, I have to say. He's going to jail and all that, but he's just, the
He's not Jewish.
Jew-ish.
He's
Yeah, he's
Jewish.
Jewish. I mean, it's probably going to put him in like some kind of Wikipedia thing forever among his other things. But the bottom line of it is that my assignment is to ask the right questions and to try to figure out how to press people. Mike, let me read Boris's question. What do you guys think of Walz embracing the socialism label as being a good neighbor? In response, that label thrown at the ticket from the other side sounds a bit of like what I like to do. Yeah, I mean, listen, I thought, Boris, to your point, I listened to that speech again today for the second time, and I thought that his constant reference, not constant in a bad way, he mentioned it a couple of times, in Minnesota that we take, or in Wisconsin. He grew up in
Nebraska.
Nebraska, right? He said, we grew up in the neighbor. You want to take care of your neighbor, even
You
if the
take
neighbor
care
is
of each
somewhat
other.
different. Right, you
Right.
take care of each other and really bringing that down to size. It's hard for us to relate in the big city our neighbor. I mean, I like my neighbor, but when you talk about that small town community and you picture
Right.
what that looks like, there was an image to it. So again, for somebody who likes public speaking, Boris, I thought it was a great image. I could see that image in my mind. I thought it was very effective. Trez?
Yeah. I actually didn't think anything he said sounded like socialism to me. What he said was, if your neighbor's house is on fire, you don't worry about who he's living with, whether he's gay or straight, whether he's Muslim, Jewish, Christian, no religion whatsoever. You help him put out the fire. What he said was, when I was a legislator, I fought to make sure kids had a breakfast in their stomach and a lunch in their stomach so that they
Right.
can learn. What
Right.
about that sounds like socialism to me? To me, that sounds like somebody who's taking care of his neighbors. And to that whole small town feel, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if you look at it in very pragmatic terms, right? Where are they trying to get independent votes? Well, they need to get them in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, and in a lot of those places, they do have the types of small towns to which he refers. And so again, does he come off a little bit folksy at time with some of that stuff? Yes, but here's the plan without trying to get into identity politics. All right, some of those working class white men, we need to get some of them back from Trump. We need to get some of them back. The guy who goes out in the woods and shoots a deer, we want to get him back. And she figured Tim Walz is the guy to help her do that. Now, again, whether that's a good calculation or not a good calculation, I can see where I can see the strategy behind it, Ray.
Yeah.
We need to get working class white men, in addition to minorities, in addition to women, in addition to gay people, in addition to everybody that Trump seemingly seems to turn his back on. We need to get all them, but we also need to get working class white men back. And that's what she was bargaining on by selecting Walz.
Boris just wrote another comment. I'm going to read it in a second, Boris. And I'm going to ask you a question, Boris. And Trez, I'm going to ask you a question in a moment that's going to get us both in trouble. But before I ask that question, let me just ask you this. Did you happen to see Governor Hochul's speech, or did you miss that?
At the DNC?
Yeah.
I didn't know she spoke. See, that's the thing. I can't sit
listen,
through 16 hours for four
okay.
consecutive. I can't do it.
I'm telling you as a friend, you truly, truly did yourself a favor, whether you realized it or not.
Really? Was she that bad?
Honestly, I've never heard of her speech. No, I'm not a fan of hers. It's true. I'm not. Okay, that's good you said that, because it's true. I'm a little bit biased. I don't think the governor's. I have nothing against her personally. And
Okay.
when I've met her, she's been extraordinarily nice, you know. So it's not that. It's just truly the fact that I don't think she's been great. But at the DNC, I thought she gave a speech that was just awful. I mean, even if you're a governor,
why is she speaking there? That's why.
Well,
why do we need Kathy Hochul speaking there?
Okay, so now that leads me to the next question. The only thing that she did during that speech, and Boris, I'm going to read your comment in a second, but if you want to chime in on this, you're pretty independent when it comes to this stuff. I mean, I thought that was a terrible speech. I thought that her humor is like generally lacking. I think she's better on one-on-one situations, but like in public forums, her humor is always like that. But she said something like, you know, New York is the Excelsior state, and that means onward and upward, and Donald Trump is bringing us downward. And she did this thing with her voice, downward. And I'm like, I watched it and I said, wow, this is just really bad. And then it got worse from that, you know. So I really don't think the governor did herself any favors. But I don't know. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people, you know, who are associated with her and stuff like that. It doesn't mean anything, maybe, but I just thought it was a bad speech. And you know, some people are good at speaking, some people are not. I don't think that's her strength. I'll put it that way generously. Okay. Do you think so? Her only purpose in the speech, by the way, was to talk about, you know, Trump and his convictions, and you know how I feel about some of those things, especially the case in New York with the mortgages, which anybody in real estate, I think, would feel the same way I feel about that case. But do you think
I disagree with that? But we'll agree to disagree.
Right. We can get. Do you believe that there is such a thing as TDS, and do you think that that's what's dominating the party, or was the Trump derangement syndrome, or do you think that, you know, the party has moved past that and this is more of an intellectual debate about ideas? Like, where do you think, how much of this, I guess I'm asking you, how much of this election is still about anti-Trump as opposed to something else?
Well, I mean, I'm glad you asked that question. Clearly, Ray, what's been going on for 3 nights, and will go on tonight for a 4th night, is they're trying to create a contrast, not just a moral contrast between a woman who's a prosecutor and a guy who, whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, is now a convicted felon. Okay. But they're also trying to create a contrast between the past, when Trump, you know, still uses the slogan, "Make America Great Again." We can argue back and forth about what that means. What does that mean to go back to a time that, and this is what I was thinking last night when Oprah was talking about the woman that just died, who was one of the Little Rock 4, right? That desegregated the first school in the South in 1954 under, you know, protection of the National Guard. I was thinking, well, how far back do you want to go when you want to make America great again? Is that what you want to return to? So they're trying to create a moral contrast. They're trying to create a contrast between the past and the future. And also they're trying to create this contrast between, again, you heard it last night, the darkness and the fear that the RNC really laid out, right? If we elect Biden when he was the candidate, if we now elect Harris, this is going to be such a disaster. Let's instill the fear that crime is going to overrun our city, and illegal immigration is going to overrun our borders, and so again, they're trying to create the contrast between fear and, as they kept referring to last night, freedom. Now, again, you can buy as much of it as you want to, or you can not buy any of it. But that's the contrast that they're trying to create. Now, for her part, without jumping ahead of you, Ray, I think that, as I mentioned to you, tonight, Harris has to show that she's not just energetic and that she's an improved public speaker, because, to be quite frank, neither you nor I have ever thought she was that great a public speaker. But importantly, she has to come off as a very, very serious person tonight. A sense of humor is good. It's great to have a sense of humor. That only takes you so far. Okay. I want to see tonight, I personally want to see a more serious, more, I don't know how you affect this, but more presidential or potentially presidential looking and sounding Kamala Harris. That's who I want to see tonight. I don't need specifics on policy. I'll get that during the debate, I hope. I'll get that during a long form interview. I hope we'll be with somebody who's a respected journalist that is capable of not just asking the right questions, but pressing her to give the right answers. Don't let people skate away with BS, non-specific answers. I as a voter, don't want to hear that. I want to hear specifics. And if you were wrong before, I want to hear that you can call it a flip-flop if you want, but that your position has evolved, how it evolved, when it evolved, and why it evolved. And I'm going to bring up an example you're probably going to be surprised I'm going to bring up, right? My example is defund the police. When defund the police came out, even in the wake of the George Floyd incident, you and I both agreed. We said, this is ridiculous. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And not just as a policy, but as a slogan, it was an absolute disaster for Democrats. So if I'm interviewing Kamala Harris next Wednesday on NBC, right, I'm going to say to her, Vice President, when did your position on defund the police evolve? And what is your position now? Please spell it out for me specifically, and let her. Now, again, I doubt she would do that, but I, as a voter, I'd appreciate if she did that.
Listen, Trez, I got to tell you a couple of things. First of all, if you get the vice president on and you don't bring her here instead of NBC, we're going to have a problem. I tell you that nicely. All right. But the second thing is, I'm going to go back and write down everything I ate today, or maybe what I drank. That's a little bit more dangerous, because I happen to agree. Whatever I ate or drank makes me want to agree. I agree with everything you just said. There's got to be some substance, and you're right. If she's not going to break out the substance tonight, then it's got to be something that's a little different than what we've seen from her in the past. As somebody who's been skeptical of her, critical of her, I feel very strongly about where this administration has gone wrong. I'm very critical. I think all you have to do is go to look at New York City and see how this administration has abandoned New York City vis-a-vis their relatively non-existent border policy that even now leaves the problem unsolved in terms of how we take care of the people who are here. Okay, so that's a different question, and we can get into it. I want to just mention something that Boris had read. He mentioned, I'm going to paraphrase, Boris says that basically he thinks it's going to be neck and neck, and that he thinks that Kamala does win, but it'll be close. Okay, I think that's true. This issue about debating
right,
within
I'm going to start yelling and screaming if you call her Kamala. Please don't do that. Kamala, please.
What's
I don't want to yell at you.
Can I tell you something that's interesting? Let me tell you something that's really interesting about this. My mother, I speak to, I'm here at I'm with my mother's house, right? So I'm doing this podcast from here. So I talked to my mother, and I was mentioning, uh, somebody told me the same exact thing. A friend of ours told me the same exact thing, and I said, well, I don't think I'm being offensive. Wasn't it always Kamala? Wait,
It was
and
always Kamala. It was always Kamala.
okay. So I'm telling this to my mother, and she said, she smiled and she said, actually, if she was named by her mother, which I believe to be true, okay, and there's something else I want to mention about that, but then the issue is that the name is actually Kamla, right? Meaning lotus. That's the exact meaning of that word. So it's not Kamala. She could choose to pronounce it that way. I mean, the way I choose to spell the word my name with an E at the end instead of a Y, whatever it might be. But she might choose to pronounce it Kamala, but it's probably closer to Kamla, which is the Hindi word for the word lotus. And if anyone speaks Hindi, I don't really speak it. I understand a few bits, but
But either way, you're putting
yeah.
the emphasis on the first syllable, right? Whether it's
I don't mean
come
to, yeah,
or
I
whether
have
it's
to,
calm.
okay, I have to get used to it. But the point I was making, that's your point, but I was agreeing with you that she has to give us a little bit of something different than we've seen in the past. And, I'm hoping that happens tonight.
Yeah, listen, as I mentioned to you, I think it's important to have a sense of humor, and it's important to have a sense of joy and fun. If that's where you want to take it, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that. But the stuff with the awkward laughs, that she's got to leave that behind. She's got to come off to me a little bit
Amen.
more seriously and
Amen.
a little bit more
Yeah.
if you will, presidential in whatever that looks like. And again, I don't want people to see this through the lens of gender. I don't want people to see this through the lens of race. I'm not
Right.
saying this because she's a woman. I'm not saying this because she's a person who's non-white. I'm not going to use the phrase person of color. I hate that expression. I think it's stupid. But I don't say that for those reasons. I want you to come off as somebody who anybody of any age, any race, any gender can look at and say, that's my president. That is a serious person. That's a person who understands foreign policy and economics and border and healthcare and all these different issues, and is able to speak about it in specifics and come up with solutions that she's able to communicate to very, very complex questions. I know I'm asking a lot, and quite honestly, I know that Trump doesn't do that. So I'm asking something of her that I'm not asking of Trump. And the reason for that is because I'm not voting for Trump.
Let me ask you this question, Trez. So the reports are one of two things. Either Bobby Kennedy is dropping out of the race tomorrow and he's endorsing Trump, or the alternate story is that he's dropping out of the race tomorrow, and because his wife is a Democrat, and we all know her from Curb Your Enthusiasm. She's a great character. She's a very good character on that show. Anyway, her pressure that he'll drop out and won't endorse Trump, but it seems clear that he's dropping out. Let me get you on the record here because we've spoken about this. Your interpretation of Robert F. Kennedy, yeah, Jr.'s campaign, his decision to run, his decision to drop out, and most importantly, what impact will it have on this election, Trez?
I'm going to try to be as kind as I possibly can. And in an effort to be as kind as I possibly can, I'm going to say, I don't care. I don't care if he drops out. I don't care if he sucks around Trump for a position in his cabinet. I don't care if he sucks around Harris for a position in her cabinet. I don't care if he stays in the race. I don't care if he drops out of the race. I think whatever impact he has is going to be minimal. Okay. I don't think he's going to siphon that many votes off of Harris. I don't think he's going to siphon that many votes off of Trump. I don't think his endorsement is worth the $2 that I have in my pocket. And honestly, I don't think he was ever a serious candidate in the first place. Um, Opposite of what I mentioned to you with Tim Walz before, right? Every time I hear Robert F. Kennedy Jr. speak, I like him less and less. And I wish that he would just shut up and just go away. So I don't think he's going to have an impact on this race one way or another. Here's what's going to have an impact. If somebody, some Republican strategist, can get Trump to stay on message, which is obviously a Herculean task that nobody's been up to. Nobody's been up to that task of getting him to stay on message. I think that there are opportunities for him to try to tie Harris to Biden's record, especially on the issues where he's fallen very, very short. For her part, Harris, I think, has to really land a plane. She has to stick a landing in really bad weather with high winds. And what she has to do, Ray, strategically, is separate herself from Biden's policies without throwing him under the bus,
Yep.
but yet at the same time start to unveil a vision in very optimistic terms of what a Harris presidency would look like 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years, 3 years from now. She's got to do that. And again, I'm not saying that's going to be easy. That's a really, really difficult task. She's got to distance herself from Biden without throwing him under the bus, but yet at the same time, she has to veer off from the path that she's been on with him for 3.5 years.
Again, it probably would make for a better podcast if I could find something to disagree with you on, but I truly agree with you on everything you just said, Trez. And I want to tell you what my problem with the party is, the Democratic Party, in a moment. But before I do that, let me just read what our friend Frank wrote. Frank wrote that laughter, you can't go by laughter. Obama was giving jokes while bin Laden was being killed. Interesting. And then he wrote, a dangerous man is a man with a smile on his face all the time. So I guess he's just refuting a little bit, maybe gently, the point about her laughter. Although I agree with you, Trez. I just, her laugh is a little bit,
It's awkward. It's just a little
right,
bit awkward.
right.
I mean, if somebody says something funny and you laugh, I think that's right. That's called having a sense of humor, and there's a place for that in politics. But when she's up there just laughing at nothing, it seems very strange. And again, it makes her seem nothing to do with gender or race or age. Just makes her seem like a person you don't want to take as seriously as I'd like to be able to take her. So I think she's got to leave that behind. You don't want to give the other side ammunition. The whole laughing hyena thing, I think, is very, I mean, it's typically juvenile for Trump and some of his supporters to go that route. But Trump, again, he has to stay on message, and nobody's been able to get him to do that because there are plenty of ways he can beat her down if he's strategic about it. But once he gets off on a tangent, right, and he starts just playing the hits, nobody can get him back on the track where he's actually talking about issues.
I want to tell you, Trez, I'll tell you what my problem with the Democratic Party is. If I can make it into just two simple points, it's this. Number one, why are we so intolerant to internal debate? Why can't we not talk to each other about ideas? And, there is this point about Trump that I agree. I'll answer my own question about the TDS thing. The problem with TDS is this. There has to be some recognition that every once in a while Trump is right about an underlying issue. All right. It's just that simple. It's like as if what's the expression? The clock strikes 12 twice. You could be the world's biggest idiot and you're still going to be right occasionally. Okay. And what I've seen is that, some of what Trump, and this is where I am politically, some of what Trump believes in, I believe in. When I hear him talk about our trade deals, it makes some sense to me. When I hear him talk about the new NAFTA deal, it makes a lot of sense to me. Okay. There are other things I agree with him on in terms of foreign policy and so forth. I clearly recognize the craziness and I clearly recognize his role in January 6th. But like a lot of people, I don't think the underlying ideas are so crazy that we can't talk about it. So when Trump talks about ending the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, of course, The question is, how in the world can you possibly do that?
Right.
But I have to say something. At least he's talking about ending the war.
Right.
And what I
Right.
can't understand, and I'm shouting not at you, Trez, of course, but I'm saying this emphatically because of this reason. I want this freaking war to end in the worst way, okay? And that I love you, the Ukrainian people. I've got so many Ukrainian friends, you don't have no idea. But they'll be angry at me, but I'll tell you the truth. Every single war ends with a negotiated settlement, okay? So that's the only choice we have. The other alternative is nuclear war, which, holy cow, we might actually end up with if we continue this nonsense. We have to beg, borrow, steal to make this fucking deal happen. And I don't know what the right deal is in terms of how much you have to give up in terms of land. I don't want to give up anything. But that's why we got this guy in the White House right now. He's the world's best negotiator. He's been on the Senate Committee for Foreign Affairs for 50. My point is, let the negotiators handle this deal, but please let's make a peace. And
Right.
please let's bring home our U.S. citizens and the Israeli citizens who are being held. If you want a ceasefire so bad, anybody listening, ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. All they have to do is one simple thing, which is the right thing to do anyway, and that's to release the hostages right this second. You get your ceasefire, and probably a lot more. Let's be honest. People are talking about all kinds of fun things like building a country. Okay, I'm not even getting into that. My point is, you want your ceasefire, release the hostages. And
Right.
please, when is a Democratic Party the party of endless war? It's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. And it's not about who's right or wrong. Of course, Ukraine is right. I mean, that's not even the question. It's about, are we going to fight a war for the next 20 years and spend $1 trillion for something that could be ended today? It's crazy. The second thing, real quick, is we talk about the debate and the lack of debate within the party, but the other thing of it is that not everything can be about Trump. And just moving past Trump and getting to the point where we're talking about the ideas like Obamacare, or for lack of a better word, the Affordable Care Act, which is what it always should have been known as, and the positive impact, even though it's never been a perfect bill. Those types of issues obviously resonate with everybody in this country. It's become clear because it's become widely accepted. So I'm very appreciative of the party for many things, but we can't deny the obvious. Let's not deny. That's really the point I was going to make. Let's not deny the obvious, where the
Right.
party's been wrong about things. Let's not deny the mistakes. The border thing was a disaster. Let's fix this. Let's get it right. You don't have to say I made a mistake every minute of your life, but you have to acknowledge that some of this stuff was crazy, okay? The border thing was nonsense. It never should have happened. They never should have reversed Trump's thing. All right, there should have been a better plan. Now let's fix it. And I think they are taking the steps to fix it on some level. That's all.
Right. Right. But here's my thing, though, right? I'm a little reluctant to say this to you because it's going to sound like I'm making an excuse for her. But obviously, she was handed the baton very, very recently. I mean, it's been, what has it been, 5 weeks that she's been the nominee? Is it even that much? Is it even that long?
Yeah,
So,
something like that. Right.
Again, if she's not yet talking about these issues in very specific ways, I'm going to give her a little bit of a pass for just a little bit more time for not doing that. But I think that right after the debate, it is really important for her to, it's critical for her during the debate, but after that, to sit down with a journalist who has a good reputation and spell out her policy related to some of these things. I'm not saying that Trump is wrong about every single thing he ever says, but it's hard for me to take him seriously for a couple different reasons. And again, you know what they are. I don't need to.
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it.
Here.
I don't want to beat up on the party, but I will say two things real quick, Mike, in our closing moments. Number one, Al Sharpton is speaking now. Okay, so I don't know.
Why? Why do we need Al Sharpton? I
thank
don't
you.
get it. I don't get why we needed Al. I don't get why we needed Bill Clinton. I don't get why we needed Kathy Hochul. Trim the fat. Joe Biden, of course. Michelle and Barack Obama, of course. Oprah, fine. Tim Walz, absolutely, of course.
This might be our friendversary. I don't know. We've been friends for a long time, Trez, but maybe we'll write that state down. I'm agreeing with you. Holy cow, this is unbelievable. I agree with you 100%. It's really true. I don't know why we have these people. And honestly, to add a little bit more fire to that, if you're going to put people up there to waste some time or to kill some time or whatever, entertain the people who flew there, I get that. But Al Sharpton, I'm not going to be a fan of. I'm just never going to be a fan of. I just can't get past some of his shit. And I understand that he's resurrected himself. We all have that opportunity in America, the greatest country ever, maybe. But the truth is that I'm never going to be a fan of Al Sharpton, so I could do
But
without
but
him.
but right, if you
Uh,
want swing voters in swing states who live in the
uh,
suburbs and who are likely to be white men and white women,
yes, you're right.
um,
Why would
are,
you do this?
are you courting them by putting Al Sharpton up there? I think strategically it's a mistake.
Yes.
You're alienating them.
Yeah, well, Frank just wrote black vote. Yeah, of course, black vote, Frank. That's what we all presume. But the truth is that you'd have to assume that he's not adding anything to anything. I mean, I agree with you more than Frank on this one, Trez, because I'm not a fan, Frank, of Al Sharpton at all. So I'm not. I'm clearly not paying attention. We're doing the show, but I wouldn't be paying attention even if I wasn't. He's
What
just not.
time is Kamala supposed to hit the stage tonight?
Oh, I think that's the question. I mean, listen, if we've seen what we've seen the last couple of days, not so late, but I think you're right. They're making a mistake by wasting some time here. I'd still say, listen, I wrote it earlier and I mean it. I think that for what this convention was and has been, I think they've done a good job. I think they crescendoed, even though admittedly I was a little bit checked out on Monday night, but I do think that they got better as time went on. I think the speakers generally got better, generally, with some exceptions, including this one right now. I think it's been good as a convention for what it is. But I think Boris is actually right as well. I think this is neck and neck. I don't know. I'm going to put you on the record now, Trez. I mean, it's what is it, August 22nd? August 22nd. Without
Um,
who you know where I'm going?
yeah, I do. Um, But here's the thing. Let me make one more point. They're trying to set up all this contrast between Trump being a terrible guy and Kamala being a nice guy, so to speak, a nice woman. Okay,
Right.
and the thing is that I think there's a danger to that too. I think that um, she has to show some fight. She has to show that she's willing to get down and get dirty and get nasty if that's what it takes to defeat Trump. She has to be able to show that, right? I mean, I know you admired this. I didn't quite as much as you, but I respected it when after Trump got shot, that he put up the arm and he mouthed the word fight. Okay. Now
Yeah.
I'm not saying she has to survive an assassination attempt, but she has to show some fight. I think in the USA in the year 2024, there's we've come back to the old adage: nice guys finish last. And I don't want her to be too nice. I want her, when she debates Trump, to go after him, not to be afraid to really get in there and get nasty and get dirty if that's what it takes to win the election. That's what I'd like to see from her.
One other thing I want to bring up, Frank just mentioned, he goes, Mike and Ray, do you see the difference in the audience between the RNC and the DNC conventions?
Well, I mean, obviously, the first thing you notice is that the RNC audience is pretty white. I mean, it really is. Whereas the DNC one is obviously much more diverse, which is helpful. But again, if we're talking about swing voters in swing states, in suburban areas, both women and men, you have to have not just a personality, but policies that actually appeal to them and that are going to win them back. She has to get people in those swing states to trust her, to feel comfortable going into that booth and pulling the lever for her. Because Trump is telling them if they do that, it's going to come back to bite them in the ass. And she has to convince them that that's not the case. So, I mean, that makes it sound simplistic, but
Yeah. I wanted to just share some math with you, which I enjoy math, Trez. Something interesting that I think I haven't heard any people talk about. Your thought on this. it's quite conceivable. We look at Tim Walz and we all think that he's a one-term or two, he's a vice president, right? We think he's the vice president. The same way that many people thought of Vice President Biden, that he was going to be the vice president. He was never going to be president. Let's be honest. Did anyone think in 2012? I'm sorry, in 2008, when Barack Obama won the presidency with Joe Biden as his vice president, that one day Joe Biden would become president? No, we all assumed that he was going to be vice president. That was going to be it. My point about Tim Walz is, let's talk about the math besides we talk about the image. He's only what, 61 years old? I'm going to Google it right now.
Yeah, he looks a little bit older, but he is.
Yeah, I know, but he's 61. Now, again, I'm just playing devil's advocate for a second. We could be talking about a 16-year run here, right? We could be talking about back-to-back. Now, obviously, if that were to happen, it would mean that Kamala Harris would have won in November of this year, would win re-election. I'm sorry, Kamala Harris would win. Actually, real mistake. Kamala Harris would win in 2024, and then she would win again in 2028 because she won again. And however it may come to pass, Tim Walz, who will only be at that point less than 70 years old. I'll check 69. The exact date. 69. Yeah, 69 years old. Okay. Younger than Donald Trump or Joe Biden. I mean, and only 9 years older than Kamala Harris. So the point being that, potentially you're looking at a 16-year run here. That's something that people should consider. I haven't heard anyone talk about that. As opposed, you have even if Trump wins, obviously, given the Constitution, which we all follow, and the way the rules work, he already had his one term. So the most he's getting here is 4 years.
Right. But let me just go back to policy and specifics on this race for just a moment, right? And what I want to point to go back to an earlier point you made, Harris can't offer, hey, listen, if you did well under Biden and you thought he did a good job and you want more of the same, I'm here to give you more of the same. Because who tried that in the past? Hillary Clinton tried that. She
Absolutely
tried.
True.
Listen, yep. if you did well under Obama and you wanted and you did well in the 8 years he was president and you want more of the same, vote for me. And people said, well, that's not a policy. That's not really what I want to hear. And, I mean, that was one of the things I felt that strategically she did wrong in her campaign.
I think that might be the smartest remark I've heard in a very long. I mean, I listen to everybody. I'm not saying it because we're friends. That's like a CNN. You should be on CNN. This is like way too small. I'm telling you, that's a big league comment right there because that's exactly right. That's a perfect analogy and the exact trap that she could fall into. That
people are not going to want more of the same.
Yeah, and Hillary, but to tie it into Hillary is exactly the reason. Is exactly right.
Exactly.
You're right. And the people will talk about the parallels that you're talking about two women, whatever it might be. There is a danger, and I think you tied it in perfectly correctly. That's exactly what it is. Nobody wants to hear more of the same. It doesn't resonate.
Well, as George Costanza would say, I'm going out on a high note, right?
Yeah, listen, I want to thank you, Trez. I enjoyed it. And thank you. I guess it's Frank and Boris who commented. Anybody else who wants to comment afterwards, feel free. I'm sure we'll both take a look and be able to answer anybody. But let's tune in, everybody. Let's see what happens. And thank you, Trezza. And thanks, everybody, for watching.
Always a pleasure with you, right? Have a great night, buddy.
All right, brother.
Take care.
Talk to you. Bye.